Well, hi, my name is Megan Bedell, and I'm an editor on the Corwin Press Equity and Professional Learning team. And it is my honor to introduce today's dynamic duo of presenters, Sonya Murray Darden and Gwendolyn Turner. Dr. Murray is a leadership coach with over 20 years of experience in K-12 education. After teaching in St. Louis and earning recognition as Teacher of the Year, she served for more than a decade as a building and district level administrator with impressive results in student outcomes. Most recently, Sonya served as a leadership coach, receiving distinguished recognition from the Achievement Network in Cleveland, Ohio, for service to schools working alongside leaders to help them close achievement gaps. Sonya is the CEO and founder of Equity Matters, an education consulting company focused on providing equity-centered leadership and coaching, system transformation, and professional learning for schools, districts, and organizations in many schools across our nation. Dr. Turner is a University of Missouri St. Louis College of Education professor emeritus. Her professional background includes experience as a social studies teacher, reading and communication specialist, teacher educator, and educational consultant. She has served as a curriculum reviewer, evaluator of schools, as well as a consultant focused on addressing the learning needs of students in urban and rural areas. She's also worked with educators both in the US and in other countries, including South Africa, Brazil, and Bolivia. Her first Corwin book is titled Making Schools a Place of Peace, co-written with Teresa Bay. Sonya and Gwen's new Corwin book is Serving Educational Equity, a 5-course framework for accelerated learning. This book is over 20 years in the making, and it's really born out of their friendship and mentorship that started in St. Louis, Missouri. They both have so much to share from their journey as veteran educators who have coached, mentored, and taught countless school educators, teachers, leaders, and students around the world. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sonya and Gwen so they can start your afternoon of professional learning. Ladies?
Thank you so much, Megan. And I also want to say I'm a Missouri Leadership Development Specialist. I see a lot of my Education Plus friends on here. So nice to see all of you. And it's so great to see the reactions coming across the screen. I didn't know Zoom did that. So it's so exciting to be able to see that. But greetings, everyone. It's dinner time here. I am coming to you from Fairview Heights, Illinois, which is about 30 minutes from downtown St. Louis. And I see all the locations. I was going to ask you to drop your location, but we're able to see all of you from vast places, which is so exciting. And so again, as I stated, it's dinner time for me. We're not going to be cooking. Instead, we're going to offer a menu for equity and accelerated learning, letting you know that serving that menu for equity and accelerated learning is a lot like a chef preparing a meal. It's very much so the same. You see, when we plan for equitable accelerated learning, we have to think about gathering those ingredients. We have to think about planning the occasion. We have to think about serving the students who are in front of us. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Basically, we will build on the framework and the work of Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond, where she talks about the science of learning principles, but we're going to talk about how you can accelerate the learning for students, looking at their social, emotional, and academic needs. And Gwen's joining me. She's in Fleming Island, Florida. And so we're going to just jump right in with you, talking about first, taking you down a trip down memory lane for me about my precious teacher, my second grade teacher, who was truly everything to me. It took me an hour to find her sweater. I wanted to see and find the intricate details of her sweater because just seeing it reminded me of her. It reminded me of her perfume, and she would let me wear it in class when I was cold. And I found myself asking for the sweater even when I wasn't cold. She fostered a love for writing in me that I have today. She pushed me. She held high expectations for me. And I can tell you that Mrs. Cross lives rent-free in my head today. And you are that teacher for many students who you encounter with every day. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gwen, who's going to share about her teacher as we set the stage for what we'll talk about.
Greetings. One of the things that Sonya and I did was go down memory lane and remember those teachers who made a difference for us. The teacher that made a difference for me was Mrs. Paxton. She was a marvelous teacher because she did two things and she did them extremely well. She honored our cultural identity and she offered us relevance in our learning. Coming from the oral tradition, she helped us prepare for lifelong learning by having us read the paper and then going home and sharing those experiences of what we learned with our families, because she was aware that not everyone in our community could afford the paper. Mrs. Paxton was a teacher who had high expectations. She taught me to love to read, and she believed in each student. Everyone was special in her class, and I will always be indebted to Mrs. Paxton because she did what Jackie Lewis Harris reminds us, that we must include cultural relevance as well as high expectations in our teaching.
So who was that teacher for you? Let's take a moment to drop in the chat who that teacher was for you.
Christina tells us about her third grade teacher, and Terry tells us about Mr. Dome. Julie is telling us about Mrs. Keller, who was her 11th grade teacher. And Mrs. Bat, third and fourth grade teacher. Tracy, you'll always remember Mrs. Ackerman. And Michelle, that high school English teacher we know made a difference. Thank you for sharing those.
And so we can't see your smiling faces, but we're quite sure that those teachers had that similar reaction for you as Mrs. Cross did for me. Okay.
And now we're getting ready to talk about where we're going this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are. Our goal today is to support you as an educator. Our learning intention is to help each child in your class find their academic and social potential at grade level. So we have some success criteria that we're going to be using. We will explain what we mean by accelerating students' learning through what we call our actionable plans. And we're going to have a common language that we'll use today. We're going to focus on equity and whole child education and accelerated learning. And one of the things that we're going to do is to connect those three. In our book, Serving Educational Equity, we offer a 5-course framework for accelerated learning. And we do that, as Sonya said, through our menu. We're going to be applying that menu for learning. Now, we want you to think about some of our common terms. So in the chat, I want you to think about, what does educational equity mean in your role? As Sonya and I looked at that particular term, educational equity, we went with the National Equity Project's definition that when we think of educational equity, we're thinking of each child receiving what they need, the support and the resources for that full academic and social potential. As educators, we can ensure equity when we recognize, when we accelerate, when we respect those diverse learning challenges that our students have, so that we get out of this habit of predicting failure and success based upon some factor of child's identity, such as the racial or cultural, economic, or social factors. Thank you for putting in the chat what educational equity means to you.
Yeah. Jane says all means all. Pat says open opportunities. Heather is talking about the DEI person in the district. She said she is the DEI person in the district, and she's identifying those barriers and removing them to ensure students get what they need to be successful. I love it. Oh, these comments are amazing. Yes.
It's
I love
fantastic.
them coming in.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and then people are still listing their teachers too, which is so fantastic.
We'll have a wealth of information. Thank you for providing your information on educational equity. Now, let's tell you why we focus on grade level, because it's at grade level that we break that cycle of inequity. One of the things that we used as a part of our book is Alan Schoenfield's Teaching for Robust Understanding. And what we mean by that is we have to create those environments in which each child is expected to learn at grade level. We got to provide those multiple opportunities, and we've got to target high-level instruction. We've embraced Barbara Blackburn's comments about rigor because we know we have to expect rigor in our learning activities from our students. We have to support that rigor and have those learning high expectations. And most importantly, we have to give our students an opportunity to demonstrate that they have learned at high levels. When we think about what you do as classroom teachers, we know if we can differentiate our classroom practice, if we can scaffold that instruction, we can help our students find academic success. Common language. One of the things that we're going to be asking you about as you get ready for teaching this academic year is, are you a teacher who focuses on acceleration, or are you a teacher who focuses on remediation? When we put serving educational equity together, we had to think in terms of accelerated learning. And let me share with you some of our common language on definitions. Doug Fisher and Nancy Frey tell us about remediation as a part of deficit thinking. We're always looking for the gaps. We want to remedy those gaps. We're looking for something that's missing. If you are focusing on remediation, you may be doing things like drilling your students on isolated skills that they needed in the past. Are you focusing on the past, or are you engaging your students in acceleration? This is when we strategically prepare our students for success at their current grade level, because when we accelerate, we are providing students with the learning that they need now in the present and the learning that they will need in the future. We want to do what Nikki Newton says. When I accelerate, that means that everybody is invited to this party.
Mm-hmm. So there's some amazing comments here. Marla agrees that remedial instruction yields remedial learners. Kenneth Hall said he heard Josh Parker say equity is giving kids the ability to live life on their own terms. I love it. Excellent. Yes. And so we get it. We recognize this may be our current reality. We do. We understand that the last normal school year was 2018-19, right? When students were, doesn't this look pretty familiar? Take a minute to just take a look at that chart. And so socially and academically, we're in and out of schools every day. And we know that in some cases, this can be the reality. But it doesn't have to stay our reality, because we do, even in our book, we offer multiple tools, tips, strategies, resources to help you to meet students where they are, but to instruct them and to support them at grade level. And we also get it. We do, we truly do, that around the world, we faced a public health crisis, an economic health crisis, a climate crisis, and a civil rights crisis. And all of this manifested in ways that elevated some deep fractures and inequalities within our education system. An education system that I will come to you today to say that was not necessarily built to meet the needs of all students. A 150-year-old system that has not been designed to meet the needs of all of our students. And so we know that this is what education feels like right now. I don't know about you, but if you've ever had to conduct phonics or lead phonics wearing a mask, we know exactly what that feels like. And so this is how the American teacher feels. You're carrying so much weight consistently and daily, and not just teachers, also administrators, right? This poor guy started off looking like this, and look at how he ended at the end of his day. Or I'm still trying to wonder where her shoes are, right? Who took her shoes? Who has her shoes? We don't know. But I know I see some smiley faces there. And what about this little guy? So the impact has been heavy on students and on staff. And so the response is, what do we do? He was over screen time. Clearly screen time was it for him. This poor guy didn't want it. And this is what it feels like. This is truly what it feels like. All these responsibilities are coming your way, and we have to ask the question, how do we prioritize accelerating students' learning? And so we ask ourselves, what specific actions can we take to accelerate our students' learning as a matter of equity? And so we start with what we always say has mattered, and that is that circle of control. We can be concerned about quite a few things, and we can even influence some people in some situations. But what we really and where we really want to put our emphasis on is what we can control. And we can control giving our students access to grade level content. That's something we can control at the teacher level, at the leader level. That's our responsibility. And so what we want to do is go back and draw on our why. These are challenging times. And Simon Sinek reminds us that your why has to be crystal clear, and you have to feel it deep down in your heart and your soul, because when things are hard, that's what you cling on to. That's what you hold on to. And so what we see sometimes, again, being in and out of schools all the time, is we see a focus on the what. People saying we need to focus on this discipline system, or we need to focus on this curriculum or this instruction system, when in actuality, if we talk about the why do we need to focus on this curriculum? Well, it's because right now, 20 million students can't read well. So when you orient people around the why, all of a sudden the work that we do becomes much more meaningful. And so as instructional leaders, as teachers, we want to go back and be crystal clear about our why. Because ultimately, in looking at all the research and all the data and all the standards, what has always mattered when it comes to educating students in schools is you. Teacher efficacy has the largest effect size. Students, when they come in, historically, they always look for a quiet place to take a breath, and an educator who looks at them and says, you know what? I believe in you. I believe you can. All those teachers that you listed earlier, every one of you, and this was years ago, today you still know that they pushed you, they elevated you, they motivated you, no matter what was going on around you. And so we go back to John Hattie's Visible Learning Barometer of Influence. And so we talk about collective teacher efficacy having the greatest effect size. And that's not just saying, I believe that students can do it. That's also saying we're going to put some actions and strategies in place to make it a reality at our school. And so we help schools to come up with what is going to be your collective efficacy statement as a school and as a leader, as a teacher, whatever your role is. What's going to be your statement, and how are you going to orient to that statement every day to help your students find success?
And one of the things that we're hoping that you will do today is to change a little bit of your thinking. As you get ready for the new school year, if you're getting into, well, my students have missed so much, how are they ever going to catch up? What we're finding with our work in schools is that we need to help educators flip the narrative, because What we need to focus on as educators is, what do our students need in order to be engaged with and successful, not only in their grade level work, but how can I ensure that they can actually access the grade level text and task in a meaningful way? One of the things that Tim Shanahan tells us is that students need to be engaged in grade level work, in grade level content.
And and we get this from our friends at TNTP, although most educators support the academic standards in theory, less than half believe they were right for students. So what we have occurring sometimes in schools is the "but not my students" syndrome. And so they'll say, yes, we believe in the standards. 82% will say, yes, it's right. But 44% of us will say, I'm going to water it down a bit because it's going to be challenging for my students. And so we really wanted to start here, because where we want to address unfinished learning is where it always mattered, and that's at that core instruction level, providing the just-in-time supports for students. Yes, we're talking about all of this to set the stage. We're going to get into how we actually can do that.
One of the things that we did, we created our book, Serving Educational Equity, the 5-course framework for accelerated learning, is we use the research as a frame. Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond at the Learning Policy Institute and the Turnaround for Children helped us understand that through the science for learning discipline principles, we could make a difference. And so our focus on whole child means I got to think in terms of the academic, the cognitive, the psychological, the social emotional development of children. And when we do, the science for learning development principles will tell us, first of all, think about your environment. Is it a supportive learning environment in which your children feel a sense of safety and belonging? Is your classroom a classroom that has a learning community? As we are working with educators, we're learning that unless you have productive instructional strategies that help students understand concepts, that help students learn how to learn, that focus on student-centered learning, we're not going to be very successful in moving them towards acceleration. And you have to consider the social and emotional development of the students. That positive learning environment is so important for our students. One of the things that we have done is embrace Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond's whole child focus, that academic, that social, that emotional format that is so important. The way that we would like to share it with you is through a very short video in which you're going to see that whole child education as the focus.
Yes, and so we have some comments here. A few like, I agree with you. Heather even mentioned that students have been faced with numerous school shootings and swatting incidents. Absolutely. We will say that is the reason why educating students and focusing on standards alone without addressing and acknowledging the whole child and the social, emotional, trauma responsive issues that they bring in the classroom is not going to help us to accelerate their learning. So we agree with you completely. And so we're going to show you a really short video on the science of learning principles. And it's going to be really short just to get you to see how this matters.
That a child can become a productive and engaged learner from any developmental starting point, as long as we intentionally build those skills.
Turn to your table group and discuss this. Come up with a statement.
When we're able to combine social, emotional, affective, and cognitive development together, we are creating many, many more interconnections in the developing brain that enable children to accelerate learning and development.
We got this, guys! We got this!
As educators, we have an extraordinary opportunity to shape the developing brains of children and to create that kind of stimulus that drives the integration of the brain.
Life isn't all about going at it alone. We're up there to support you when you don't necessarily have the skills or tools that you need.
The science of learning and development tells us that school needs to organize for strong relationships.
You look pretty, Miss Turner.
Thank you, baby. When a strong relationship exists with a teacher, with a mentor, with an advisor, with a school administrator, it actually can reverse the effects of adverse experiences. Children are amazingly resilient if they get that opportunity for attachment, for comfort, and for problem solving with a caring adult.
Ready, Godfrey?
Okay. So do we have some thoughts? Let's take a moment to drop in the chat any thoughts that you have about that in general.
And thoughts will probably be forthcoming
Sure.
with
Okay.
individuals, and we will check those.
Sure. Okay.
When Jane says that relationships are key, it becomes really important to us. And so we get to that point where, and now let us share what we said we would share with you, our 5-course framework for making a difference and accelerating the learning of students. When Sonya and I thought about how we would do this, based upon not only the work that we were doing with educators and with students, we thought in terms of what a chef does when a chef prepares a wonderful meal. So what we thought in terms of a 5-course framework that would start with meal planning and would basically go through 4 courses with dessert. And at the end, we would have actionable steps that you could follow. Let's start with meal planning. You set the stage. That's how you plan for equity and accelerated learning. And everybody just saw in that video the importance of those relationships. Well, we've always thought of soup as being something that is nurturing. If you want to view and practice equity in student interactions, we say, look at the teacher's self-awareness and mindset. You are not going to build a strong relationship with your students if you don't get a chance to know them. We thought that after our soup, we would have an appetizer. And I know Sonya loves the appetizers.
I do.
And one of the things that we felt is our students needed to know that we were going to use the data to make good decisions. The data and the curriculum will be used to meet our students' needs. We left our appetizer and we got into salad. I like salad. It's nutritious. It's good for you. When we got to the salad, we were thinking at this course, I want to think of the student voice, because remember, it's the student's perspective that will tell you more about what is going on in the classroom, what is going on in learning, and what is going on in the school. When we looked at the student voice, we said, okay, we've got everything set up now to get into the main course. And the main course, as you and I both know, is that robust teaching for learning. How do you teach for equity, access, engagement, and acceleration? One of the things that you're going to do is recognize that you cannot have a quick fix. Mr. Allen tells us there's no quick fix. We have to offer systemic changes with what we do. And so when we think of an entree or the main course, we think of the teacher using multiple ways to meet the needs of individual students. We think of scaffolding because it's one of the ways that we know will make a difference. Sonya and I both agreed that we loved dessert. And when we are dealing with desserts, one of the things that she and I both know is you cannot have too much dessert. It's not good for you. But when we thought in terms of dessert, we thought in terms of student engagement, because you have to think about it. it's affective, it's behavioral. We are looking at all the cognitive engagement that students have. So we've got our 5-course framework from our planning to our dessert. And one of the things that we were going to ask you to do is to look at our 5 stages, our courses, and see which of these do you think you're most prepared to deal with. Can you put that in the chat?
And I do want to double stamp just that there's no quick fix. And this is the reason why we thought about or we created this 5-course framework. Because as we think about accelerating learning, there's no way that we can just do this work by looking at standards alone. We have to look at what our students need, and the courses will remind us to engage and support our students in this way. And because we are also practitioners, we put resources in our book for what's called time to dig in tools, with tools that you can readily implement in your classroom or your school right away, whether you're an instructional leader or if you are a classroom teacher, or even if you're a teacher assistant or a parent. All the resources in our book can support you, because we knew that you needed to not dig around and look for those strategies. You wanted them right there. So our book is pretty comprehensive in supporting you with that. And so that's exactly what I was going to talk about, the time to dig in tools. There are some comments in here too. I didn't know if you wanted to address any of those.
Yes, I didn't want to skip them. I really appreciated where people were saying, these are the courses. Sonya, if you go back and put our courses up again.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Are responding to them.
Yes.
They're saying, look, it's course 1. It's that nurturing that I would give in the soup or the relationships, or it's the appetizer. I see one person is saying, hey, it's both the salad and the entree, and okay, it's the full meal. We'll go with it. Jerry is saying it's the salad and the entree. And we love it, Pat, dessert. We know that this is important. One of the things that we did in the book is we gave you some sample lessons so that you could see how we would prepare, how you can prepare, and how you can use this. Sonya's going to tell you a little bit about how we took action on each of these. Thank you for keeping this one up, Sonya.
Thank you, Shanice. She said it provides such good samples, and that's what we wanted. We wanted you to have real-time actionable strategies that you could use right away. And so as you begin to take action, right, because we see a lot of people talking about equity in isolation or talking about acceleration in isolation, we wanted to talk specifically about what it looks like. So as you meal plan, what does it mean to meal plan and to prep and prioritize? Well, that is intellectually preparing for the lessons. That means you do the work that you anticipate your students to do, so you can identify those misconceptions. And then I think Kenneth commented a little earlier about that soup course, how we have to disrupt deficit thinking. And so as we think about that soup course, how do we build those relationships? How do we address our own deficit thinking about student capabilities? Because those biases happen even before we think about it. And how do we elevate students' genius potential? And so we put some real-time practices and strategies that you can use in your learning space to think about and have discussion about how do we disrupt the status quo and low expectation that could be creeping in that we don't even recognize. And then as we think about that appetizer, which Gwen told you earlier, I'm guilty, I love a great appetizer. But how are we humanizing our data? And how are we looking and making those curricular decisions that have our students to show up? So we talk about windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors. We talk about that. And we talk about what it means to be intentional as you look at those areas.
One of the things that the 5-course framework allowed us to do was to look very seriously at student voice. We think we give opportunities for students to engage, but as we have viewed classrooms we've realized that there are some things that you can do tomorrow so that every student's voice is elevated. We do gallery walks. We do the All About Me sessions. Sonya early on did a recording where African-American boys actually told us, this is what makes a difference when it comes to our reading enjoyment. And we captured those stories and we learned so much from it. So elevating student voice is just as important in understanding and embracing equity. When you get to the main meal, when you get to the entree, you and I both know you must teach for robust understanding, which means that you cannot offer students skills and strategies for yesterday's learning. You must focus on what they're going to need, this just-in-time learning. We are scaffolding those opportunities. We're using reciprocal teaching. I love close reading. We use annotation. We are engaging students in real relevance in the classroom. It becomes a community of learning. And one of the key points in our use of the entree is making students aware that they can control how they learn. So we spend a lot of time on metacognition, helping students understand you can learn how to learn more effectively. And when we got to student engagement, we thought about how everyone was embracing technology, but we have a caution here. Your technology cannot take the place of quality instruction. It's just a tool. It's like what we're doing today, a tool that you use and you use effectively. Sonya and I use Bates criteria for going through and even selecting the technology and the software that we use. One of the latest things that we're finding out from the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics is that screen time is not always good for the development of young children. So we can embrace technology as a support, but it can never be used in place of a teacher. For more information on strategies and techniques and vignettes for each of our 5-course framework, we invite you to look at the resources we provide you in serving educational equity. We've got it there and we want to share it with you.
And just two quick things. One, I want to talk about that dessert. And I think when you nailed it, just want to say, just like too much cake or too much dessert can make you sick, allowing the technology to take place of your high quality teaching and learning is counterproductive to what you want to do to move your students academically. And also something else that you said about my research study with those African-American boys, I can tell you that they were interested and excited to read the books that their teachers loved.
Mm-hmm. And
that was the research.
Is giving us
that's what they loved.
In the chat where it says too much screen time really does limit the students' talk time. Remember, it's a home and a community of learners. So let's let our students be that community of learners. And Sonya's going to tell you that in our book, we've got some wonderful resources for you. Sonya, you want to tell them a little bit about our...
So we have the Time to Dig In tools, where we put that menu in front of you because educational equity is complex. It is. Focusing on accelerated learning is complex, but this simple, memorable framework can help you as you begin to tackle this work. And so we wanted to just make sure that you knew the building relationships, the high quality curriculum, the background and experiences, specifically at our main course, looking at that science of learning, design principles, and lastly, technology. And as we close, because we started talking about our own teachers, I want to tell you about one of my students, and his name is Mark. I changed his name for the purpose of us talking today. Real student, real situation, real school. I was a principal, and I was introduced to Mark many years ago, and I was introduced to him with people telling me that he was disruptive, he was combative, he didn't want to learn, he had some struggles. And when I got to know Mark, because I went to seek him, partly because I did not want to embrace what I heard about him. I wanted to learn about him myself. And I didn't have to go far, you guys, because school started at 7:30. Mark was in my office by 7:35. So, and he rarely made it to my office. I rarely made it all day in class until noon. I mean, he would always have some struggles. And so there was some back and forth with us to the point of him doing the work with me. And so I still held him to high expectations. I got to know him. I started talking with him. And I also learned that he had some home struggles. That's his story to tell, not mine. And this particular day, an essay came across my desk, and I asked him if he would like to participate. And, you know, he basically believed all the things that people said about him. He told me, I can't write. Why would you think that I could write an essay? And he also told me, have you seen my discipline record? He said, I can't write the essay. And so I let it marinate a bit, but we continue to build relationships. And finally, he came to me, and I asked him one more time. I said, I believe in you. I think you can do this. And I'll tell you, he tried it because I believed in him. He did. So he was one of the top. We submitted the essay. And I will tell you, I wanted to call them and say, please, if you don't select any other essay, select his, right? I didn't do that, but I think I said positive energy in the air. They submitted it, and he was one of the top 50, top 30. He was down to the top 3 essays. He won the essay. And I will tell you guys that yellow scarf that he's wearing right now on this photo, this was the first time I saw him smile. And it changed him. I watched it change him. And so as I think about a whole child approach and what that means, Mark has been on a positive trajectory since then. I am happy to tell you that I later learned that yellow means optimism. Yellow means hope. Yellow means renewal. And so I want to encourage you as you go back to your students, even the ones who are the most challenging, that you remember his story. Mark graduated. So excited to share that with you all. He graduated high school, and he's in college. And so that's one of many students that this has worked for. And so as we close, I want you to just put in the chat, who is that student for you? Who is that student for you?
And we'd love to have your responses. In other words, we want to name those students that you've made a difference.
Nick, Jane says Nick.
Yes.
I love it.
Lonnie,
Shanice, yeah. Yeah, and even if you don't have that student yet, you have a whole new school year that you can start to build relationships with that student. Steve, yeah, Andy. I know, we can name them.
Tyler.
Yes. Clement, Tyler,
Cody.
Yeah. Yes.
And
just keep them coming.
What you to do.
Kyle.
Think about how you make a difference. And so
Riley.
I ask you, we have presented to you some of our information on accelerating students' learning.
Maria.
And we have made some, hopefully, explanations on equity and whole child education and accelerated learning. And we've given you a menu. So if I had to ask you this question, well, which of these are you ready to try? Would you put in the chat? Is it number 1, number 2, or number 3? Can you tell us?
3, Kenneth Hall says. Darius, oh, look at all these student names. I love it. Marla.
Well, I think the menu has gone over, or else people are ready to fix dinner or lunch. Maria is saying all 3 of these. This is wonderful.
I love it, Susan. I love it. That says 3. We feel, oh, yes. I love it. Okay.
And
And
so
so
Sonya and I
as
are
we
going to do this one
close,
together. We
we
decided
are.
that we had a journey of self-reflection, and she and
Yeah.
I want to share this final quote at the same time with you because
Yeah.
it's such a
So
special time with us.
I did
Ready,
then.
Sonya?
I did then what I
What I
knew
knew
how to
how to
do.
do.
Now that I
That
know
I know
better,
better,
I
I
do better.
do better. Dr. Maya Angelou's
Okay.
quote applies to so many. We would like to thank you for joining us. And we know that Melissa is going to be identifying some of the winners. We want to allow her to do that. And we know that we're going to give some time for questions if we have them. So thank you.
So you guys have been amazing. Thank you so much.
I want to give you high fives.
Okay, so questions. We have some time. And there was a
Yes.
question from Michelle Bradley that came in. How can we measure the learning of students more holistically rather than overutilizing standardized high-stakes assessments that do not reflect all the valuable learning students are doing in school?
Yes, such a wonderful question. And I will be honest that right now I can tell you that Dr. Linda Darling Hammond's team, the Learning Policy Institute, they are pushing for this policy to change. As we shared, there's a 150-year-old education system, right, that needs to be overhauled. Simply put, it needs to be overhauled. And so what we can do, though, be getting back to our circle of control. Remember what we talked about. We can every day in our spaces, we can ensure that we are not just focusing on standards alone, that we're seeing that whole child and that we're giving them opportunities to engage in ways where we see their social emotional needs and their academic needs. And that is something that we can control every day.
And one of the things that we had a chance to do when Sonya was principal, many of my teacher education majors had a chance to work with her students. And one of the ways that we checked to see how well students were learning was through the products that they created. We had criteria. Her students wrote some fantastic stories. And in fact, we published the books and they had an actual book reading. So when you think in terms of assessing your students, the whole child, you can't measure everything with a paper and pencil test. We all know that.
Mhm.
We collect the data, but think in terms of you've got some very diverse students. And while we respect districts and what they require, we know we need to move beyond a single test to show children have mastered content. So we thank you so very much. It was a fantastic question.
Yes. And it's one where we start our book talking about focusing on the circle of control. What can we control right now? What can we focus on right away? I think the recent disruption in education is forcing us to look more holistically at ways that we can help our students to find success.
And Heather agrees with us by saying these multiple methods
Yeah.
of assessment. And I always call it, you want products that show what
Yes.
students have learned. That's why
Yes.
when your students created those books, it was fantastic. We
Yes.
would like to thank you again. Were there other questions, Melissa, or did we have the only ones?
There was not any that came up in the chat that I saw, but let's see if anybody else has other questions they want to add now.
And we work alongside schools every day. So I did drop some information in there. If you want to follow our newsletter, we will definitely share best practice. We're right alongside you guys in this work. We enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we love supporting you. We really do.
Kenneth is asking about a copy of the slide deck. What we actually will provide and what Corwin provides is a copy of the recording. Kenneth, we are going to have to reflect a little bit on that. Now, many of the things that we have in our book, like our menu, all of those things are available. So when you get the book, you'll be able to have those. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. You guys were amazing. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Sonya.
Yes.
Everyone enjoy the
Thank
rest of
you,
your
Megan.
morning, evening,
Thanks, everybody.
afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are.